Well, first of all, I'd say that what we've done is implement the so-called NATO comprehensive approach, a civil-military campaign, a counterinsurgency campaign to be sure, and one that does indeed embody many of the principles of the counterinsurgency field manual that we developed back in 2006 and which we employed in Iraq in the surge of 2007-2008. And I think generally it has borne fruit. There's been no question about the difficulty, about the fact that there have been setbacks as well as successes, but I don't think anyone denies at this point that over the course of the last year, the momentum of the Taliban in much of the country has been halted and indeed has been reversed in some very important areas, such as those in central Helmand province and very important districts around Kandahar city, Jari and Panjwai, Mullah Omar's former hometown, and even in the greater Kabul security bubble, periodic sensational attacks like the Intercontinental Hotel attack notwithstanding. So again, I think that by and large it has proven out, though there is again no question about the challenges that it has had to contend with, in particular, of course, the challenge of the sanctuaries that the Taliban and other insurgent groups have been able to maintain in Pakistan.
A central part of COIN is the protection of the population. Some Afghans, including President Karzai on occasion, would say you're not protecting the population, quoting a number of civilian casualty incidents. How would you respond?
Well, I think again you'd look at the areas that were not under Afghan and ISAF control in the past and now are under control. There's no question that there's still a very tough fight going on. And as we always say, it gets harder before it gets easier, and we have definitely been in the getting harder phase of this overall endeavor. Having said that, actually, if you compare May of this year with May of last year, the attack levels are actually about the same. They did not continue up the way the intelligence analysts had predicted. And June actually saw a slight reduction of 3 to 5% over last year. Now, we touch wood, we have to see if that trend continues or not, but it is significant nonetheless just for those two particular months after watching last year. Very, very significant increases on year from a month last year, say, to a month in the previous year. But this is hard. There is a resilient enemy, and there is no question that that enemy is willing to cause civilian casualties. It's an enemy willing to blow himself up, in some cases to achieve objectives. But again, as you look at the expansion of security bubbles, as you look at areas in which the Taliban had the momentum last year, but no longer has the momentum this year, I think that you have to say that that is progress, albeit still progress that needs to be solidified and expanded.
And the issue, the very serious issue about insurgents being able to roam freely across the border into neighbouring countries such as Pakistan, should you have kept more troops in those areas?
Well, it's a very serious challenge, and indeed in some of the most important areas we've worked hard with our Afghan partners to build a layered defense. For example, on the border between Host Province and North Waziristan, there's quite a significant force called the Host Protection Force, a border force that is quite effective and well supported. And we're seeking to expand that, seeking to expand similar forces in Paktika and some other areas to build literally a layered defense all the way back from the border, from these rugged, mountainous, tribal areas in which the insurgents have been able to establish safe havens over the years. Many of these areas, frankly, are just not those in which you will ever see sizable Afghan or ISAF forces. You're talking about 10 to 14,000 foot peaks in these areas, very sparsely populated, but certainly problematic. And so over time we have to develop sustainable security solutions to deny these areas to the insurgents on this side of the border, and then to work with our Pakistani partners so that they can do the same on the other side. Because keep in mind that many of these insurgents are posing what we believe is the most existential threat to Pakistan, to pose the most urgent threat to the very existence of the Pakistani state as its citizens know it. and killing dozens of Pakistani civilians in an average week.
What about levels of violence over the past year? Some reports, when they refer to your role, looking at your role over the past year here in Afghanistan, have said that under your role, violence has increased, and they refer to this increase in special operations. Some reports go as far as saying that, and I quote, Afghanistan has become a special forces killing ground. How would you respond?
I'd say what I just said a moment ago, which is that in the month of June, the level of insurgent attacks actually went down compared with June in 2010, and that in May it was roughly the same. Now that's quite different from what was predicted by the intelligence analysts, who predicted the kind of continued increase that we have seen literally year after year after year for some probably 4 or more years. The fact is that when you add tens of thousands of additional Afghan and ISAF forces, as we have over the course of the last 2 years, and that Afghan surge will continue as they go on the offensive, as they take back areas from the Taliban and the other insurgent elements, it's to be expected that they're going to fight back. And that is indeed what has taken place. Beyond that, the targeted operations actually generally result in no shots fired. It's a very small subset of these special operations in which shots are fired. And when they are, not all the time, but generally they are quite precise in their effects. And they have been very effective indeed in getting those individuals we're seeking and typically again capturing them, because we want to interrogate them and indeed to learn more about their networks.
The Afghan police, army, the Afghan security forces in general, are they really up for it, do you think?
They are, again, with some caveats, and you have to acknowledge, I think, an unevenness among some of the forces. I think it's always true in a case like this, and this is my 3rd or 4th country in which we've tried to carry out a mission like this, that local police forces, not the Afghan local police per se, the village-based security forces, which are really quite effective and are tied into the Ministry of Interior and controlled, but the Afghan uniform police, as they're termed, do tend to be uneven because indeed they are vulnerable in a way that Afghan army forces are not. So as a general hierarchy, the Afghan Special Operations Forces, over 12,000 of them now, really quite capable, and indeed leading nearly a quarter of the so-called night raids at this point in time. We certainly provide enablers for them, intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance assets, and other specialized tools and so forth, but they are the ones going through the door. They're the ones doing the apprehension, the searches, and all the rest of that in almost a quarter of the missions at this point in time. The regular, the commandos, the army forces and so forth, again, generally doing well. Certainly there's a range of them, all the way from still being established all the way up to an actual independent infantry battalion now as it's assessed in the commander's unit assessment. And then, as I said, the police that tend to be a bit more uneven, running the gamut from quite good to some that are suspect in the eyes of the local population because of a variety of reasons.
And I think that was sort of shown in the intercontinental attack.
I'm not sure I agree with that, actually. If I could, let me talk about that, because if you contrast the intercontinental attack, frankly, with the tragic Lashkar-e-Taiba attack in Mumbai, which lasted for well over a day and a half and well over 100 civilians killed, the Intercontinental Hotel, a massive hotel, hundreds of rooms, 2 huge wings, multi-floors, and the Afghan security forces responded quite capable and relatively quickly. Again, it does take a few hours to alert a force, assemble it, issue its equipment, develop initial plans, deploy to the location, get an update, and then launch into operations, keeping in mind that the individuals they were going after, each of them was wearing a suicide vest and heavily armed. And they managed to clear this entire hotel over the course of a single period of darkness. Yes, there was assistance at the end with a NATO helicopter with a sniper, basically because we had the sniper at the airfield and we had the helicopter at the airfield, and they've done it before. This is not the first time to try to do a sniper operation at night from a helicopter. We did have forces that were, again, in the role of mentors, if you will, but it was the Afghan forces that died in this operation. There's no better, if you will, example of the fact that they were the ones confronting these would-be suicide bombers and ultimately forcing the remaining handful up onto the roof where they were killed by the sniper or by other forces. So actually, we tend to see this as quite a creditable performance, certainly a courageous performance by the Afghan Police Crisis Response Unit, a high-end unit by the Afghan National Army Commando element that deployed without its mentors, by the way, because the bulk of its force was already on an operation somewhere else, and then a particular intelligence unit that also did well.
But it was the actual uniformed police that were there at the scene initially that, according to eyewitness reports, actually ran away instead of staying there and fighting.
They were killed at the gate, so again, they didn't all run away, I can assure you, and it was initiated with a suicide car bomb blast, and several, I think 4 or 5 of those guarding that gate stood, fought, and died. So again, there may have been some, but those with whom our advisors were located gave uniformly positive reports.
Just over a year ago, you were commander of CENTCOM. Did you ever envisage that you might end your military career here in Afghanistan?
Well, I didn't. You know, I thought I would end it as the commander of U.S. Central Command. This was unexpected, needless to say. You know, we've jokingly said that I went to the White House for the monthly National Security Council meeting on Afghanistan and Pakistan with President Obama and came out with a new job. And that's not far from the truth. Again, I was sitting downstairs in the White House waiting for the start of that meeting in General Lute's office. Someone stuck his head in the door and said, "Has anyone seen General Petraeus?" And said, "Yeah," and said, "I want you up in the Oval Office." And obviously that led to the Rose Garden announcement that day after the President had accepted General McChrystal's resignation. It was completely unexpected and also an extraordinary privilege. There's no greater honor, there's also no greater responsibility than that of command. And I've been privileged to have probably more than my share of commands, especially as a general officer, and especially in some pretty important endeavors in combat.
General Petraeus, thank you very much for joining us.
Privilege, thanks.